Hello and welcome to my challenger guide for Yone. Starting off the keystone, this is really the only option right now due to how crazy efficient it is. Lethal tempo is disgusting due to the synergistic effect of Yone's skills. Yone is a very unique champion because his Q and W both have attack speed scalings that affect cooldown and cast time. We're going to talk more about this during the itemization portion, but maxing out the stacks on this keystone will give you additional attack range that allows you to stick to your enemy better. Triumph is a Feast or Famine rune that rewards you for fighting aggressively. This enables crazy outplays and 1v2s, and you just gotta play for dopamine when you're playing Yone. Alacrity is our best in slot rune here due to the attack speed scalings on QW again. You technically could run Bloodline or Tenacity, but it's just going to be better to have Alacrity in 99.9% of situations. Finally, we have Coup de Grace or Last Stand. Statistically, Last Stand is more consistent because you'll always be getting value from this rune if you're playing aggressively. Your choice here is contextual though. For example, Last Stand gives 5% damage at 60% or less HP, 11% at 30% less of your health, keep that in mind. Whereas Coup de Grace gives 8% only when the target is below 40% HP. So if you're not taking damage back, Coup de Grace is better in some situations. But if you're taking any damage whatsoever, or you're making aggressive engages, you're pretty much always going to be getting value from Last Stand, which is why it's so good. Next up, we have secondary runes. There is a lot of valid runes here, so we're just going to explain each one and then when and why to take it. First of all, Conditioning is a great scaling rune for mid to late game tankiness. I take this in relatively free matchups where I don't need value from the other two runes in this row. Second Wind gives you near infinite sustain and heavy poke matchups where you're outranged or heavily suppressed. This is a really great rune all around, so if you're just playing and you want to be consistent as possible, I just take Second Wind every time. Bone Plating is specifically for kill lanes where you need to mitigate burst damage or you're all-inning extremely early on. An example would be something like Qiyana. Obviously this rune has a 45-second cooldown, so it's pretty easy to poke it off then wait to engage if they're smart. For the next row, we have Overgrowth, which once again is a great rune for getting more survivability in a free matchup. Goes really nicely with Conditioning, it's all about that effective HP. Second, we have Revitalize. Revitalize pairs nicely with Second Wind and Lifesteal. It also amps your W shield. I usually take this in really hard matchups, but if you're pretty much playing any game, there's going to be an infinite amount of CC because that's just super good in the meta right now. So I usually take Unflinching because if they have more than 2 to 3 sources of consistent CC, you're going to need this. It is very hard to access Tenacity due to our reliance on attack speed from Berserker's Greaves, and we can't take Bloodline Tenacity either, so it's not really an option. In regards to shards, you're going to be taking attack speed for scaling on QW, adaptive force, and then armor MR depending on matchup. You could take scaling health, but you just want to play for early lane, so take defense stats. What's going on, guys, and welcome to the itemization portion of this guide. We're going to be starting off with illustrating why attack speed is so important for Yone's Q and W. You're going to see here that the cast time, and stack cooldown is affected on the bonus attack speed value that you have. For Q, you need 111% to hit 1.33 CD, and then for W, you're going to need 105%. So most of this is basically finding a way to maximize our attack speed while getting the stats that we need in terms of crit. In case you guys did not know this, Yone gets bonus crit whenever he buys items. It's multiplied by 2.5. So this is kind of what all of these itemization is based off of. Okay, here we are. So basically, if you are going to start a game, it is always pretty much going to be the same 2 items, which is going to be either D-Blade or D-Shield. If you are in a free matchup or you feel like you have extreme kill pressure in the first 4 levels, you're going to go D-Blade. Now, the issue with going Doran's Blade in a more volatile matchup is that if you make mistakes, it's amplified a lot more. Because if you go D-Shield, you can effectively win any single matchup just by drain tanking people. This item is just ungodly levels of broken. So if you're a new Yone player, I would just go ahead and start with D-Shield and just play for first item. Once you get B-Greaves, you can just pretty much kill anybody. But if you are a more experienced player and you know the limits of your champion, then going D-Blade becomes more of an option. But D-Shield, just overall great consistent item, probably just god tier item in general. But you're going to see this in pretty much every single game that you play, but you're going to see that Yone's rush Berserker Greaves as their first item, and the reason why this is because it is legit best in slot in every single way. It gives you attack speed, which synergizes with your QW, synergizes with lethal tempo, but it also gives you a good amount of move speed, which allows you to stay in range to continue autoing, continue getting Q stacks, and of course stacking your lethal tempo. So this really just kills 3 things, 3 birds with 1 stone. This item is just absolutely disgusting on Yone, which is why it is so gold efficient. In regards to the first item, if you are playing a snowball matchup where you are going to absolutely murder / decimate / destroy the enemy team, you're going to go and rush Zeal. Now, the main issue with rushing Zeal when you're in a bad matchup or you're not going to snowball early is that you're delaying your mythic by basically 1,050 gold. So if you take a look at the stats on this item, great attack speed, great crit chance, and it gives you move speed that allows you to stay in range and get more autos off. So when you're snowballing, this item is just nuts because it gives you a really cheap power spike and you can just go ahead and go ham off of this. But if you're playing to scale, you're playing to hit just your item in general, going Zeal can pretty much fuck you over. So if you rush Mythic Shield Bell, it's just a more consistent item. And it's not like you're going to need the Zeal anyways if you're in a losing matchup or you're not actually playing to win. So rushing for the Noon Quiver in that circumstance could be better. If you're going for Recurve Bow as your first item, it is typically because you're playing against a shit ton of tanks. Blade of the Rune King is really great against tanks or melees. When I play mid lane Yone, I find that I very rarely get the opportunity to go Blade of the Rune King. So you're typically going to be sticking between Zeal and Noon Quiver in that scenario. If you play Yone top, you're going to get to play Blade a lot more often. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that this is a very good item in the current state. Now, when it comes to first item completed, we're pretty much always going towards Shield Bow. This is just because the item is really busted on Yone, gives you a lot of survivability, gives you good lifesteal, gives you good damage, gives you attack speed, all stats that Yone needs to succeed, as well as the crit chance. So something to keep in mind here is that if you do go Zeal into your Shield Bow, you have 88% crit, which is also why this is such a good combination. If you're rushing Blade of the Rune King, then you're just going to go and finish this item, and then you're probably going to end up and buy a Shield Bow as your second item. In the event that you're going for Shield Bow, which is, once again, 99% of games, sorry, probably 75% of games, you're going to make a decision here between going Infinity Edge and Mortal Reminder. Typically, you just want to go Infinity Edge because your goal is to kill somebody. Your goal is to absolutely obliterate people. If you're building defensively, you've kind of lost, in my opinion, on Yone. Of course, you can go Death Stance second item. You can go more of a tanky build. It's just really not the playstyle that I'd recommend. So, ideal path going to be Shield Bow into Infinity Edge. This gives you 100% crit as well as additional critical strike damage. This is important because Yone loses crit damage from his passive. So this kind of supplements that and just gives you overall 10 times more damage potential. Unfortunately, fucked up and misclicked, so I gotta add this back in. Apologies. If you're against a really heavy sustain matchup where you're going to need additional anti-heal, you can go and go Mortal Reminder. This is stuff like Silas, Aatrox. It doesn't really happen that often, and they also just nerfed Grievous Wounds. So it's very rare that you get to build this item, but keep in mind that this does build out of a Zeal. So if you went Zeal early and you want to curve out extremely early, you don't get as much damage from Infinity Edge. Sorry, you get more damage from Infinity Edge, but I want you to recognize how cheap this item is in comparison. So you're getting a power spike, 900 gold faster. It could potentially build out of an item that you already have, which is really good for your pathing, your item route, but you just don't do as much damage. So it's more of a utility purchase if you want to be like super online the first 15 minutes. Otherwise, just greeting for the Infinity Edge can make a massive difference. In terms of third item, it's pretty much always Death Stance. This item is just absolutely busted. Great armor, good damage, gives you ignore pain, and then if you kill somebody, it ignores all the damage that you took during that period of time. So essentially the way this item works is it will delay damage over 3 seconds. So imagine you take 1,000 damage, and then you instantly kill somebody after that. That 1,000 damage is legit just deleted. It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And then you heal for 140% of your bonus AD over 2 seconds. So you're essentially healing 1.5 to 2k HP in a single fight just from having Death Stance. From fulfilling your archetype or duty, which is just killing one person. Now, if you're doing a really wonky build with the Blade of Rune King, then you're going to end up buying either Infinity Edge or either Mortal Reminder as a third item. That's why this is kind of confusing in a way. But if you're not going to be going Death Stance and you need a MR itemization, then typically you're going to go ahead and buy Wit's End. This gives you a good amount of MR, but also damage. Bloodthirster is actually a pretty good item, just because they nerfed Grievous Wounds, and it gives you a lot of 1v1 potential and a lot of outplay potential from the healing. But when it comes to Yone, it's just so simple, because you just straight up, you're always going the exact same items. You have a lot of versatility in the way that you itemize if you want. It typically plays out the same way because IE shield bows is broken. That's really all it comes down to. Like, you can make room for Gale Force or anything else like that. We can't build Maw because we have the Lifeline passive from Shield Bow, which is why it's not included in the third item. And then 4th item onwards, you're really just building other items that you have not built already. Now, probably the most realistic build here for Yone is just going to be Beegreaves. You technically could swap this out to Merc Treads later if you need to. Shield Bow. Absolutely hate the search system in this. Infinity Edge. Third item is either Death Stance or Wit's End. And then at this point, it's either Guardian Angel, Wit's End. I mean, you could even build a Mercurial set. Like, straight up. The game should be over by these 3 items, honestly. These 4 items, rather. But it's way too hard to lose on this champion once you get to Infinity Edge, honestly. Now, it is really hard to play Yone, but this is itemization, so we're just going to stick with that. But that's basically it. Welcome to the champion ability overview. There's a lot of combo guides already out there, so I'm not really going to put too much effort into the combo portion of this video. I will probably leave you guys with some gameplay that you can base this experience off of. But we're going to go and read the skills out here just to make sure that we're all up to date on what this champion actually does. So the first thing is Wave the Hunter, which is Steel and Spirit. Yone uses 2 blades, causing every second attack to deal 50% magic damage. This means you are converting half of your damage over to magic whenever you auto twice. This is really important because sometimes you get stuck in comps where you do way too much AD damage, and this is kind of a way to supplement it. Now, the other part of this is that you get an increased crit chance by 150%, but his critical strikes deal 10% reduced damage, and then anytime you build crit over the 100% threshold, it gets converted over to additional bonus AD. So, basically, if you finish 2 items, you'll always have 100% crit. You'll have 88% if you have 1 completed item and a crit item, the cloak. And it's just pretty great. It's really, really nice. But I'm going to demonstrate for you. But there you go. Critical damage, also magic. Next up is Mortal Steel. Yone thrusts forward, dealing damage. On hit, grants a stack for 6 seconds. At 2 stacks, this skill causes Yone to dash forward with a wave of wind that knocks up and deals damage. So this skill is really cool because you basically are micromanaging the stacks throughout the lane phase, and then finally you get a dash effect. This sends out a whirlwind, but also Yone thrusts forward. So both instances can hit somebody. It doesn't deal duplicated damage. But for example, if they dodge my character moving forward, the whirlwind effect still goes past, and that can hit them as well. The other cool thing is that this can actually go over walls. You could do this pretty much over a ton of terrain on the map. You can even go ahead and queue through this raptor wall, and then just go ahead and build this up. Then you can do that as well. So the skill has a lot of application, a lot of value, and it's just really great all around. Something to keep in mind here is that it does apply on-hit effects and lifesteal only to the first enemy struck, but it can be interrupted by crowd control. So if you're playing against champions that can micro-stun you a lot, it will literally interrupt your Q repeatedly, which is super cringe. Once again, the attack speed affects the cooldown and cast time, so it gets faster to use and it comes up more frequently the more attack speed you have. Exact same thing for your W, which is Spirit Cleave. Attack speed will affect the cooldown and the cast time, but Yone cleaves forward, dealing percentage health in terms of physical and magic, so once again another split damage type. And he also gains a shield for 1.5 seconds. This shield will increase based on how many champions he strikes. So it's going to be 50% extra for every other champion. Now it does a minimum damage against minions, which is pretty nice as well. And then you can see the scaling here isn't really that amazing or anything like that. But it does give you a shield. It's pretty nice to use. Next up is going to be your E, which is Soul Unbound. This is the most crazy part of his kit and super fun to use, but Yone enters a spirit form for 5 seconds, leaving his body behind for the duration and gaining 10% ramping move speed. So this is really cool because when you use this skill, it'll dash the spirit back, so you can use this as a way to dip, duck, dodge away. Unfortunately, this does not allow you to go through walls. It gets stopped by terrain, so that's something you have to consider. Just to clarify, you can go spirit form through walls, it's just that your origin point will not be able to go through terrain. But when the spirit form ends, Yone snaps back to his body and repeats 25% of all damage he's dealt to champions during this time. So you can recast the skill to end it early, and you can snap back. But you can use this as a way to engage, so example here, instead of always relying on your Q3 to engage, which is what most low elo players do, you can instead just go ahead and E at melee range, start stacking up an auto, and then you can pull back at the end, and then you can Q back in if you really need to, or even ult from your origin point. But you're going to do 25% of all damage you've done, so you can see here, I can just stack up an absolutely absurd amount of damage, and then when I snap, there's 900 true damage. So really fucking insane skill. So this will automatically snap you back after durations run out. You see this yellow bar here, but if you're CC'd or you get grounded, it will prevent you from snapping back until that duration has ran out. So if you're playing against heavy CC teams or against a Cassio, that shit can be super annoying. Your E has two different colors to signify when somebody will die to execute, so bright red when they're not killable, and then it'll change to a dark red when snapping back will instantly kill somebody. This is kind of hard to illustrate in a training tool, but you can actually use your E to prevent or cleanse status effects. When you snap back during the cast time, you're going to be immune to CC, so you can actually use it to break stuns. And we finally have our ultimate, which is Fate Sealed. Yone strikes all enemies along a path for 152 physical and magic damage, once again split damage source, teleporting behind the last champion hit and knocking up victims towards Yone. So this is a really cool skill because it will straight up blink you. It is not a dash. You'll just teleport behind them and then you can go ahead and get infinite amounts of damage. But this has a lot of potential because you can hit multiple targets, which is really fun. So it's going to pull everybody towards the last target available. So you're going to see here, it's going to go everyone getting sent to that last target. So you can end up pulling a bunch of people in a direction that would be favorable towards your team. Otherwise, it'll go ahead and just pull a singular target. Now, sometimes this can be bad because it might send you further than you anticipated and it'll bring everyone in that direction, but that's kind of something that you have to work with. If no champion is hit, it'll blink you to the maximum range, so you can actually use this as a get out jail free card. It goes through walls. You can use this as an engage tool if you're ganking through a lane or onto somebody. Using it as a repositioning tool is actually not that bad. It's actually pretty good in some scenarios. A lot of times you'll see people use E and then ult over, and then they can snap back after doing damage, but the value of just repositioning here is so insane because now you don't have to worry about running out of duration of your E. You can just go ahead and fully commit here. Because if you do this play where you ER over the wall, you only have 3 seconds to do damage before you get pulled back, and then you're gone. You can't recontinue. But sending yourself over the wall, staying melee range, it's pretty poggers. Tips and tricks, you can actually stack your QR if you do it correctly. So something to note here is that if I engage with EQ, E1, Q3, if I do it with the maximum range, there is no way for them to dodge my Q3 and ultimate since knockups are not affected by tenacity. But I'm going to show an example of what not to do. So a lot of times Yones will go ahead and get as close as possible before queuing. So this is really good because it's hard to dodge your Q3, but what happens if you Q3 at melee range is that you will not be able to ultimate because they're going to get out before you can press the R button because of the animation delay. So they can dodge your ultimate if you Q3 at melee. So if you want to combo your QR together, you got to make sure you're doing it at max. Alright, welcome to the combo portion. We're going to do the speedrun style because there's already like 19 billion videos for this, but you can Q flash, you can W flash, you just have to initiate the skill before you flash, and then it'll cast from the new direction. Typically, you want to just build up your Q3, and then you're going to E1 Q3, and then that way you can snap back to safety after you've comboed. The thing is, a lot of people will get stuck in that pattern where they will only E1 Q3, and then it's very telegraphed, which is why I recommend just mixing in the E-casting from melee range, and then snapping back, and then Q3ing back in. So I did show you guys this earlier, but let's say example, you're just staying over here, just E forward, build up your Q3, you have full stacked LT, so you can re-engage from here, or you can just walk away. Important thing to understand is that Yone is all about mixing in autos with your skills, so E auto, Q auto, and then W auto. But every time that you weave in an extra auto, you're getting a significant boost to your damage. You stack LT faster, and then that just gives you a way to amp a lot of the duplication from Soul Unbound. Once again, auto Q auto, auto W auto. It's just a really easy way to add extra damage to your combo without just over-relying on your skills and only playing around your skills. Thanks for watching. Now that I've completed my Yone guide, I can start uploading Yone videos, so those will be coming soon. Hope you enjoy. Bye-bye. Make sure to like and subscribe.